Welcome, readers of Nimrod and lovers of poetry and prose. My name is Boris Dreluk, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Nimrod International Journal at the University of Tulsa. Beside me, or in front of me, on the screen are Hachi Chukwu, our brilliant managing editor, and Stasha Cole, our equally brilliant, indispensable editorial assistant. Every year, Hachi, Stasha, and I have the pleasure and honor of reading through thousands of submissions to our annual awards, the Katherine Anne Porter Prize for Fiction and the Pablo Neruda Prize for Poetry. After making the initial selections for the long list, our team entrusted the final selections to our esteemed judges, Nancy Jooyoun Kim and Randall Mann. Today, we are joined by both judges, as well as by our first prize winners. I will introduce today's guests, and then we will hear our winners read. Born and raised in Los Angeles and now living in the San Francisco Bay Area, Nancy Jooyoun Kim is the New York Times bestselling author of the novels What We Kept to Ourselves and The Last Story of Mina Lee, which was a Reese Book Club selection. Her essays and short fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Guernica, The Rumpus, Electric Literature, The Offing, and elsewhere. Born in Provo, Utah, as we just learned, and raised in Kentucky and Florida, and now also living in the Bay Area, we could have saved some Zoom energy and had you Zoom from the same place. Randall Mann is the author of 6 poetry collections, most recently Deal, New and Selected Poems, and is the recipient of the 2003 Kenyon Review Prize in Poetry and the 2013 J. Howard and Barbara M.J. Wood Prize from Poetry Magazine. He is also the author of a book of criticism, essays, and interviews, The Illusion of Intimacy on Poetry, and his writing has appeared in LitHub, Kenyon Review, Paris Review, Poetry, San Francisco Chronicle, and elsewhere. Our first prize winners are, drumroll please, Michael Lavers and Talia Neffson. Michael is the author of 2 poetry collections, After Earth and The Inextinguishable. His poems have appeared in Plowshares, Canyon Review, Agni, Southwest Review, the Georgia Review, and elsewhere. He teaches poetry at Brigham Young University. And Talia grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where she still lives. Her short fiction has appeared in the Hopkins Review, is forthcoming in our journal, and she's currently shopping her novel around. So if you're interested, you'll probably soon see it. At this point, I'd like to ask Randall to share with us a few thoughts on Michael's work, and after that, Michael will read a few of his poems.
Thank you so much, Boris, and it was a real honor and pleasure to read these poems. So just a couple thoughts about Michael. I really enjoyed reading his poems, and in my statement, I say that there's a precision in the poems, and I think that's just another way of saying there's an attention to what happens or what could happen as the lines unfold. In his poem, What Is, there are the lines, church choirs that are like church choirs, line break, since what is incomparable. And I really love the truth and mystery of that. I read his poems and I was sometimes reminded of poets I greatly admire, Chris Wyman, Amy Clampett, Robert Hass. And when I read his poems, I didn't strain or squirm. He invited me in subtly and carefully, and then started undermining my comfort. And that sort of, I guess, masochism is one of my favorite things as a reader. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's very generous, Randall. And thank you to everyone. Thank you, Randall, for choosing my poems. And thank you to Boris and everyone at Nimrod for publishing them and for hosting this reading. I can't remember how you phrased it exactly, Randall, making you squirm, making you feel uncomfortable, undermining your comfort. A huge compliment. I like that. That makes me very pleased. So thank you for that. I'll read a few poems. The first poem that I'll read is called Darkness and Rain. I don't think it requires much explanation, but I'm noticing now in preparation for this reading that it's a poem that makes rather absurd claims, almost daring the universe to, I don't know, upset my life. I don't know what got into me when I wrote this poem. Here we go. Darkness and Rain. I want to weep. I want to shout at everything, what death? The heart, the breath, all things that say you can't go back. You can't go back. My wife beside me in her sleep and Turner's Tintern Abbey on the wall. My children in their blankets and the leaves scraping the window, and the deer under the leaves with goofy rose-flecked mouths all say it, and the tar smell in the tool shed whispers to the clouds, let go, let go. How sad all things must be. I want to say, go on, take what I love, just try. Darkness and rain, the heart, the breath. We do have deer that come in and out of our yard here in Provo. Lately, there's these giant bucks with these huge antlers that kind of love the fallen apples that we have in our backyard. Okay, so this next poem, which Randall quoted from, is called What Is? We do not know what is, what sings. Breath stokes the air, and what is what gets what it desires, what is needed to enrich itself, though it's complete. Snow on the mountain, grief, a boy drawing a dinosaur. What is pushes around what is, and there's an oriole, and there's a pine. Not everything is clear, but what is possible, and we do not want to die. We love, but what is that? A teacup turns into a broken teacup. Chekhov's stories make us cry. All breath, all air, all little light, all tumbling, all seething of the waves. Church choirs that are like church choirs, since what is incomparable. What can we say? Not everybody will believe what is, that it will end and be continued. Almonds, mercy, grass still green, uncontemplatable things. No, we don't know what is, not what our love has been or could become, or why it's needed to enrich what is the unenrichable. Our arms open and closed, snow on the mountain, grief. So maybe I'll read a couple poems in a different kind of mode, a different style, these poems that rhyme. Like everyone during COVID, my wife and I had to develop certain, I don't know, new hobbies, new interests, new ways to spend the time. One thing that I noticed happening in our house was this huge collection of cacti that my wife was compiling started appearing and growing and growing. So this poem is about that, and it's called The Cacti. Then to my safe, dull world they came. Weird birds my wife wanted to tame, legions of spikes and spines and quills roosting on tables, crowding sills, maces and morning stars that she rifled from nature's armory, half-sprung grenades and razor gauze, filling the gaps where softness was. Brought home from nurseries, shipped by mail, 2 inchlings culled from roadside shale illegally, 3 filling shelves with inbred cuttings of themselves, crude cousins in a hunched-back bloom, colluding across the living room. Here dragon eggs, there devil's phlegm, a barb-encrusted diadem of torturous gold, tantrums of green. Why are they here? What do they mean? She dotes and fawns, but can't appease their antisocial tendencies, and so a dust of spidery hairs, despite the doubled gloves she wears, will keep her scratching where they kissed a barred knuckle, an exposed wrist. If nature doesn't make mistakes, then what are these? And yet she makes more space for them, until our mild, safe house has grown carefully wild, with ragged stalks and snarling ropes. She's right. Somehow these misanthropes, these gargoyles, barbed and hairy, sharpen the need for sanctuary and are proof that paradise is fenced by ugliness and vice. Even perfection needs its flaws, the thrill of risk, the threat of claws. Why be so picky with my praise? Turning the lamps off, she surveys a world of troll, pagan, and infidel, grinning in moonlight. All is well. And one more poem in which my wife makes an appearance. This poem is a sonnet. It's called Coda. From the garden rose the sound of bees that lurched and wobbled through the peonies. We ate eggs and toast with milk that warmed in minutes in the sun while fat drones swarmed and looped like bullets misfired from the fields. It was the sound the mind makes when it yields to glutted blood. I didn't understand until one smelled the syrup on your hand and in a gold-encrusted drunken strut smeared pollen from its mandibles and gut along your wrist. That morning you had tied your hair, and as you rose and ran inside, it gently bounced and loosed and then unfurled. If the next is better, I'll still miss this world. I'll read two more poems, I think. This poem is called We Suffer. We suffer. The ignorant suffer and the wise, the poor and the rich. The aged do not grow used to suffering, and the suffering of children knows no bounds. William Blake suffered, though he had seen God. We suffer, and the red leaves of October do not compensate. We suffer, and Chopin does not console, nor does the dusk green nail polish that our daughters wear. All animals grow mortally afraid, and even plants reach out for light, which they can't always find. We suffer because we feel we shouldn't, that a place exists where suffering is not, where light is the color of the sound of owls, where even the nail in the plank is rejoicing. Black lilac, black lace, intuitions of blessedness, and yet we suffer and suffer still. We suffer because we want to be happy. We suffer because Renaissance painters taught us to see ourselves as here, and those we love always receding over there. We suffer until there is nothing left, and it was in reverence to that which suffers that made heroes at Troy anoint their bodies with oil. Blake said there is suffering in heaven, which he would know. We suffer and we don't earn our suffering. Like orange poppies or like snow, sometimes our suffering vanishes. Sometimes we wake up, walk outside, and it's just there. Okay, the last poem I'll read is called A Machine Designed to Hunt Mammoths. A Machine Designed to Hunt Mammoths. It was written in the year or two after our first child, our son, was born. And, I just had all these normal anxieties of a parent ushering new life into the world. How is this little creature going to make it? Why did we make him? What was he designed to do, and what is his purpose? So this is, I guess, addressed to him. It's called The Machine Designed to Hunt Mammoths. Your burden is to make yourself belong here, though you don't, and in a body where the errors of the past might see themselves corrected, though misplaced, misused, shaped by the bog light that designed you, by the blue deer-haunted mountains, by your thirst, by darkened air and dappled grass. To hear what you are in the echoes of hunger, in passing, in the need to go on, to go forward always, on a path kept dormant in your feet, some scent inside your brain you did not know you were following. To go through rat-gray water, over hills, over dunes, under the odors of twilight and the settled stars, warming yourself by your motion, by the courage of your going, by glimmers of something enormous beyond. Your burden is to gather everything as night comes in, to tell the story of your journey so tomorrow it can start again, to justify your being here and then to justify your imminent going away, to be something like nothingness, to be even a shadow of that perfect thing, the thing you are, the source of an arc, a dangerous edge, to be a machine designed to hunt mammoths in the presence of no mammoths. Yes, your burden is to make an end for yourself, a destination that has been expecting you, which looks at you the way you always knew you should be looked at, as a practiced trembling, a flickering fear, a letting go, to go until the line between you and the world dissolves, the line between you and what's moving up ahead, the life beyond your life, ragged and windblown, brooding, vast, hauling its fraying weight into the future, into nothing, but for now, right there, a lonely flame receding through the snow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. The poems are so metaphysically intrepid, and you're so ambidextrous. You can work with free verse and blank verse just as skillfully as you do with the tightest rhymes, the tightest fixed forms. Like Randall, very much like the judge who picked your work, same qualities. Hearing you read makes me regret only slightly that I'm not in the book publishing business, because I could read and listen to your poems all day long. So thank you very much for sharing them with us.
Thank you.
And
That's very
now,
kind.
you're very welcome. And now I'd like to ask Nancy to introduce Talia and tell us a little bit about what she saw in Talia's short story.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm a little bit weepy after that, Michael. That was very beautiful, and congratulations to both you and Randall. I mean, this is I just feel so blessed to be here today. Thank you, Boris, and to Nimrod. It's I just to put us all together, I think is really extraordinary. You're going to do it in print with the journal, but even here in this space, this weird dystopic space that we're in right now, I think is really really lovely. And like most of us are strangers, right? And so for us to be here sort of meditating on these words, these themes, and sort of, I mean, I just heard Michael and I kind of wanted to weep, you know. I think that's a really extraordinary thing. So thank you again. Talia. So this was a anonymous judging, but I recognized myself. There was so much recognition in this for me. I recognized myself as soon as, and I think that is such a lovely quality that we're trying to protect here in what we do, as strangers. These misfit girls that you have in this story who must not only survive their girlhoods, but also these constructions of womanhood that we aren't sort of presented in a world that is often controlled by men. For me, this was this extraordinary, intimate portrait of this intense childhood friendship that was kind of born out of the city in many ways, which is something that I relate to as having been born and raised in Los Angeles, that becomes a kind of found family that cannot actually sort of survive the erasures on which adulthood is often built. And so I read this as a story of looking and being looked at as a girl and later a woman, and what it means to understand the self through art made by men. I found this to be both, it's a journey that you take us through. I find it to be both technically and publicly beautiful, but on a sort of private level to be extraordinarily profound. It was kind of a look at the ways that we create ourselves in the face of extreme loss and extreme separation, whether that separation is a separation caused by time or by life and death itself. And so this was one of those stories, and the reason why I thank you for making this job so easy for me. And the finalists were all extraordinary, but the reason why this stood out to me is that I know that I'm in for a real ride when I sit down and I start reading and I literally feel my breathing change, you know, because it means that my heart is kind of palpitating on a different frequency. And I felt that immediately. And I felt so safe in this world that you constructed, that I was safe here, despite this kind of sense that we have on a daily basis of worlds collapsing, right? I felt so safe inside the art of what you were doing. And I could tell, I could feel how much labor you had put into this. And I have such admiration for that. And that's something that I also relate to a lot myself. Having, you know, I published two books, but I worked on them over the course, one of them over the course of 20 years and the other over 10 years. And so I could feel how much you had poured into this, as effortless as it appears on the surface. It was clear to me that this story was, in many ways, like Sandra, its protagonist, an art historian and a mother. Like Sandra, the story itself was a kind of survivor. I could really feel that, and I think that that was just so thank you for creating this and for allowing me to inhabit this space where I felt safe and seen. I think that's just an extraordinary testament to what we're doing here as people who create art and people who publish art and people who celebrate art and support it. We're creating spaces for strangers to kind of find each other and ourselves in, and hopefully we find something better at the end of it. And then I felt that way reading your story. So I'd love for you to share with everyone.
Wow, thank you. I cannot imagine a nicer introduction, Nancy. You said all the things that anyone would want to hear. Even just saying that you recognize yourself, I mean, what more could I want from a reader? So thank you. And I think, as I said to Nancy in a message at some point, like, this story it's a bit of an odd, sad, quiet story, maybe compared to others. And so it just felt extra lovely to have somebody connect with it. So thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Michael. That was amazing. Thank you, Boris, everyone, for making this possible. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here with you all. This story is a bit of an odd one to choose excerpts from because it sort of goes back and forth in time, and that movement is kind of a central part of it. So I'm just going to read a few pages from the beginning and then a few short excerpts, and hopefully that will sort of give you a sense of it and make you want to read more when you get the issue of Nimrod. There's a little bit of Italian in it. I'm so sorry to especially some of our audience members who I know have much better Italian than I do. I'll try not to mangle it. Mostly they're place names. And the title is Cenacolo. Most of you probably know. It usually refers to like a Last Supper painting or image. But I think if you go back to the Latin derivations, it's just like dinner place. And it can also mean like a circle or a group of artists or like-minded thinkers. So here we go. The cherries were loose and lying on a table. There were also peacocks, or at least one peacock. Sandra remembered it clearly, off to one side with a long sweeping tail. She couldn't remember the exact location of the painting. She knew that it was in Florence and that it had the quiet, chalky quality of frescoes that they both loved. Whenever Sandra saw cherries loose on a plate or in a heap at the supermarket, it reminded her of that painting, A Last Supper. There might have been something historically important about that particular Last Supper. Sandra remembered Mel sitting cross-legged on the ledge of the loggia in Piazza della Signoria, directly under the entrail trailing Cellini Medusa head, and reading aloud from the grubby gombric she insisted on lugging around with them everywhere that summer. Sandra could still picture it clearly. Mel's glossy head bent over the book, the shadow cutting across Mel's legs just before the hem of her army green jean cutoffs, the soles of Mel's bare feet, gray from walking around the city in flip-flops, and the rest of Mel's legs, glowing in the bright Italian sun, like a young woman's arms in a Caravaggio, reaching out, bright with bareness from a black-brown gloom. They'd had to get let in specially. The church or chapel was only open to the public on particular mornings of the week. Mel had talked about going there all summer, but they'd never quite gotten themselves ready in time to make it. That's how it always was with Mel, rushing, barely making it before closing time, negotiating with guards for one more minute. At the Last Supper fresco with the cherries and the peacock, which Sandra remembered as being near but not on the Arno, on the north side of the river, she had a general impression of rusticated stone and an empty, dusty piazza. Mel most likely did the talking. Eventually, the guard said, "Solo 10 minuti," and led them out of the sun, down a dim length of church hall, into a large, largely empty room. The fresco took up the whole far wall of the room. Sandra and Mel stood silently looking. Then they raced around, peering at it from different angles, whispering, "Fuck," and "Look," and look at those fucking feet, as they always did. Sandra didn't remember who noticed the eggs on the table or the fringe on the tablecloth, but she knew she'd been the one to point out the peacock. Mel had pointed out the cherries. Sandra didn't think of the fresco every time she saw or ate cherries, just sometimes. She thought of Mel and of that summer at other times too, but not as often as she'd once assumed she would. Sandra never tried to find out more about the fresco, though she knew she could easily. When it came into her mind, she waited, and the thought would pass like a vaguely familiar stranger walking by outside a window. That summer in Italy was the only time they'd lived together, though for most of middle and high school, they'd left school together on Fridays and returned home together to one of the other's apartment after curfew, but before dawn, in mirthful or dismal or jittery silence, depending on how the evening had gone. Mel was usually drunk enough for Sandra to stay awake, peering down at her friend's shape on the trundle bed, trying to decide if she was on her back or her side. Mel rarely vomited, but Sandra didn't yet understand how it all worked, being sick and caring for one another, and she worried. Once, after a long conversation about Mel, Sandra's husband, Eddie, printed out an article about the ways childhood best friendships often serve as practice runs for adult romantic relationships. He left the article on Sandra's side of the bed. Sandra read it, then folded it and kept it on her desk for a few weeks until the boy got hold of it and covered it with blue crayon scrawls. Then she threw it away. On Saturdays, if Sandra woke first, she lay with the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun, listening to the adults moving around the apartment and trying to guess what kind of mood Mel might be in. Starting around age 14, Mel began Saturdays by climbing wordlessly out onto the fire escape to have a cigarette. Sandra's family lived on the 6th floor of a high-rise. Her fire escape looked over a dismal courtyard with moss growing between cracked slabs of concrete. Mel lived with her father and stepmother in a railroad apartment on the 3rd floor of a brownstone. Mel's mother lived in Mel's grandparents' house in San Antonio because she was trying not to do drugs. Except when she was doing drugs, and then she lived in different places. Mel had never lived with her mother, at least as long as Sandra had known her. On Mel's fire escape, there was a large blue glazed flower pot with dirt that Mel stubbed her cigarettes out in before dropping them between the slats to the street. There were no flowers in the pot. Mel was the only one who ever went out on Sandra's fire escape, except one oppressively hot night when they went out together with a container of watermelon chunks from the deli. They ate the watermelon and spat the seeds down between the slats. They were huddled together in their jackets on Mel's fire escape under a white late winter sky when Mel first pointed with her cigarette at the perpetually shedding gray, beige, and white bark of a grand old London plane tree and said, "Brought to you by Puppy de Chavannes." The "brought to you by" joke became a favorite. On the F train, sitting across from a woman with a long, slender neck and sloping shoulders, Sandra would whisper, "Brought to you by Hang." In the deli, Mel would point at a shelf of soup cans and say, "Brought to you by Andy Warhol." Later, Sandra could see that this wasn't especially clever. At the time, she thought it was immensely clever, and that they were alone together in appreciating their particular brand of cleverness. On the side of a hill, about 3/4 of a mile south of the Arno, outside the entrance to a ground floor apartment in what had once been a villa, was a small garden backed by a stone wall. There were no flowers in the garden, only grass and a huge tomato plant bearing cherry tomatoes that appeared in green bunches overnight, turned yellow, then red, then split and festered faster than Mel and Sandra could eat them. In the shade of the tomato plant grew mint, rosemary, and basil plants that seemed always wilted, no matter how often Sandra watered them. Dusky green succulents with artichoke-like heads grew in terracotta window boxes along the edge of the balcony of the empty apartment upstairs. Despite not being cared for, they grew wildly, creeping over onto the terracotta tiled roof. But there were no flowers. Sometimes when Mel climbed out onto the fire escape to smoke on Saturday mornings, Sandra would pretend to be asleep and watch Mel from behind. Smooth shoulders rounded into a slouch, arms long and solid, fawn-colored, like a woman in one of those Turkish bath paintings by Ang, but wearing a wine-red cotton tank top with frayed straps instead of no top and a silk turban. Without being able to see it from the front, Sandra knew that the wine-red top clung to Mel's small, pillowy breasts separately, emphasizing the flat space on her chest between them and making them stand out like the almost but not quite anatomically correct tits of a late medieval Sienese Madonna. Picturing this while she looked at Mel huddled over her cigarette always gave Sandra a strange, aching, prideful, pitying feeling. Many years later, perched on the closed toilet seat, watching Eddie bathe their boy, age 3 and docile with exhaustion after recovering from a fever, Sandra experienced a similar feeling. She leaned over to kiss the boy's head and managed to splash bath water up the front of her shirt. Eddie laughed, then, seeing her face, wrapped a wet arm around her legs and squeezed. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here and just read a very short bit about when Sandra and Mel met as children. They both carried their sketchbooks with them everywhere, a habit they had started together in 4th grade. Before that, Mel had drawn on whatever paper she found at hand, and Sandra hadn't drawn much at all. Mel covered the back of her math worksheet with lions. They were drawn in various poses, roaring, lunging, drinking, sleeping. Leaning over so that Mrs. Pinkow didn't hear, Sandra had whispered, "How did you learn to draw like that?" "My mom taught me," said Mel, without looking up. Mel was new that year. "My mom's an artist," she said. She was 8. Sandra was 9. "They're really good," whispered Sandra. "I can teach you," Mel whispered back, still not looking up, "if you want." After that, they were both artists. Sandra didn't stop drawing altogether until senior year. "I'm a consumer, not a maker," she'd say then, when people looked at Nick's pictures and asked, "Are you an artist too?" "She's too smart for that," Nick would add, putting his arm around her waist or his hand on her shoulder. And I'll just read 2 very short other excerpts. Nick is new. I'll read you a little bit with a little more Nick in it. He's the boyfriend, Sandra's boyfriend at the time of their summer in Florence. Sandra had been spending all of her free time at Nick's apartment on Avenue A. Nick had a tub in his kitchen and a roommate named Vilmos, who barely spoke English, left blossoms of cigarette and charcoal butts in mugs, and never showed anyone his drawings. There was a fire escape off Nick's bedroom window, but it was blocked by a heavy gate that Sandra couldn't lift by herself. She first saw Nick standing in front of a large painting at the Bonnard exhibit at MoMA. Mel was in Providence that month at a RISD pre-college program. She'd gotten a scholarship. Nick and Sandra lingered in front of the painting. Other people scrutinized it briefly and left. Nick looked back and forth between his sketch and the painting and occasionally sideways at Sandra. Sandra looked at the painting and surreptitiously from the corner of her eyes at Nick. He had a smudge of black charcoal on one cheek. Sandra stared intently at the beautiful violet-white tree in the painting and wondered if the smudge was a smudge or a Marilyn Monroe-style birthmark. Nick's thick, untidy hair was dyed Marilyn Monroe blonde with dark roots. Sandra came to the correct conclusion that the smudge was in fact a smudge. "That fucking cat is really something, isn't it?" said Nick. Sandra laughed. Nick didn't drink or smoke as a rule. He consumed what seemed to Sandra like tremendous amounts of coffee and drew bad charcoal self-portraits and some interesting still lifes involving bottles of Windex. He'd worked for years as a waiter at a Cuban restaurant in Midtown, but he never asked Sandra to visit him at work. Nick was the first person Sandra slept with, unless you counted the stuff with the tall kid downstairs at the Wetlands. The tall kid at the Wetlands had been wearing wide-leg jeans, frayed at the bottom. He'd complimented Sandra on her Ramones t-shirt. "My best friend gave it to me," said Sandra. "Cool friend," said the kid. She couldn't see what color his eyes were, but when he smiled, his teeth were even, clean, and faintly luminescent in the black light. "Don't you think it's a little iffy?" asked Mel when Sandra first told her about Nick. "I mean, a guy who's like 30 wanting to hang out with a 17-year-old? "He's not 30, said Sandra. "He's not even 27 yet." She didn't mention that she'd been sleeping with Nick for weeks already while Mel was in Providence, or that she was reasonably sure that she was in love with him. "I still think it's weird," said Mel. Sandra arranged for the 3 of them to go to the Met together. Nick went on for too long about the El Grecos. Mel said nothing. They stopped in front of a small Fra Angelico crucifixion that Sandra and Mel had once spent a whole afternoon looking at, marveling at the solidity of the Magdalena's feet under her dress, trying to decide what the other lady saint had in her basket, fruit, Eyeballs? Stones? Nick put his face close to it, examining the surface critically. It's kind of a mess, he said. What a shame. Then he walked on. The three of them never hung out together again. I'll just read one more very short excerpt, if that's okay, time-wise. This is sort of grounded in the present during Sandra's adulthood when she takes a work trip to Italy and ends up in Florence for the first time since they'd spent that summer together there. Every night while she was away, Eddie video called with the boy so Sandra could tell him a story before bed. Sometimes the boy requested the salad bug story. This was Sandra's sanitized version of the time she and Mel found a large leaf-like bug crawling inside the big bowl of salad they'd proudly prepared for themselves on one of their first nights in Florence. Sandra exaggerated their reactions to a vaudevillian scale, omitting the fact that they'd both been drunk enough to find it wildly funny when Mel knocked the open, not quite empty bottle of wine off the table. It bounced once resoundingly on the tiled floor, then, spinning like a spin-the-bottle bottle, flung an elegant arching spray of burgundy onto the white wall. Before they left for the summer, Mel somewhat effectively masked the stain with a white pastel. Perched on the edge of the bowl, the salad bug cocked its cherry pit-sized head, inspecting them from one side like a lizard. Mel fashioned a trap from an empty yogurt container and a pity palace floor plan. The creature hopped from the lip of the bowl to the tabletop, and after 2 failed attempts and much yelping, Mel caught it. They could see the pity palace map lift in the middle from the pressure of the bug trying to escape. Poor thing, said Mel. It's freaking out. Quick, said Sandra. And without stopping to slip their sandals on, they carried it outside and released it into the grass. It was too dark to see it hop, creep, or fly away. When Sandra told the boy the salad bug story, she referred to Mel as my friend Mel. At the end of the story, the boy always asked, "What happened to Mama's friend Mel?" Sandra would answer, "She got sick, so she went to live in Colorado to get better." Sometimes the boy would leave it at that. Sometimes he would ask, "Where's Colorado?" or "Why?" The night before Sandra left for Italy, he requested the salad bug story and at the end said, "Can we visit Mama's friend Mel in Colorado?" "No, sweetie," said Sandra. "Why not?" asked the boy. "Because she's not there anymore." The boy asked where she was. Sandra paused and said, "I don't know." "I didn't technically lie to him," she'd explain to Eddie later. "I mean, we don't really know where she is, right?" "It's okay," Eddie reassured her. "It's hard to know what to say." And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Talia. That was beautiful and moving, every bit as moving as it was when I first read it, and then reread it when laying it out. And I want to emphasize what Nancy said, which was so insightful, that the role of the author, poet as well, is really, at least physically, to control the breathing of the reader. And you controlled my breathing, you controlled the pacing of my day for the day in which I read that story. Um, and Michael also mentioned Chekhov in one of his poems, and I see so much of Chekhov in the structure of this tale. It's not just a slice of life. It's chosen scenes that make an entire life, suggest an entire life. All the gaps are filled in our minds, and you bracket an entire existence, a whole group, and their shared life in just a few pages. It's really quite extraordinary. So thank you very much. Um, so I've said my piece. I've heard my piece. I would really love for the rest of you who have joined us, if you have any questions or comments about the stories, to just unmute yourselves and share. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or you can put things in the chat if you'd like. Anything you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you, or questions that you might have. Let's say about when the issue will be available. I see Penelope says that both were tremendous, and I can't help but agree in the chat. Would anyone like to say anything or to ask anything of either the judges or the winners?
Actually, Boris, I want to say thank you for your lovely words, and also the Chekhov thing. I made a note when you were reading, Michael, because I'm actually right now, shamefully for the first time, reading Chekhov stories. And I'm
Yes.
just
Well,
losing my mind. But I hadn't read him before I wrote the story. But he's kind of like blowing my world away right now. So it was just all it all came together to have that in the
it
poem.
does. It really does come together. It really does come together. And he's one of those people whom, at this point, you don't have to read. If you've read any short stories of the 20th century, you've almost read Chekhov. He's everywhere. But I'm glad you're reading him now. What story? What story was the last that you read? Do you recall?
It wasn't the last I read, but the one that I like can't get out of my head is Ward 6.
Oh yes, of course.
Which is
That's
just
where I,
like,
that's where I belong.
yeah, likewise.
Uh, no, Board Six is a phenomenal story. Yeah, yours reminded me a little bit in a very attenuated way of a story called a boring story. That do you know that one?
I
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
Thank you. That's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
compliment.
yeah. What a ballsy move! What a gutsy move to call a story a boring story. Only Chekhov could pull it off.
So good. It's like Mavis Gallant calling a novel a fairly good time, which
Yes, exactly.
the best thing ever, actually. But yeah, I had a super
Yeah.
nerdy question from Michael. Because in your sonnet, you ended with rhymes that Donald Justice ends the wall. And so
Yes.
I wondered if it's a direct nod for the
Oh,
world and then the giant wings unfurled in Justice's great Berryman surprising Iowa sonnet. Uh,
It was a class
wow.
assignment if you haven't read it.
Class assignment. And he was like,
Yeah.
no one should write a sonnet this good.
Yeah,
So,
Berryman stamped around the room as he often did,
yeah.
declaring that everything was over. It's one of those poems when you read it once and you commit it to memory. And yours is as well, Michael. I mean
Wow, that's
I repeat the justice to myself every other day. The walls surrounding them, they never saw the angels often.
Angels
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
Angels were as common as birds or butterflies.
Yeah.
See, I'm just demonstrating that I can do it.
Yay. Yay. Yay for you. But Michael, what were you thinking of Justice's sonnet at all? I don't know.
I wish I could say yes. I wish I had lines of it by heart. I adore Donald Justice. I don't recall what is this poem called?
It's called The
The
Wall.
wall.
Well, I'm ashamed to say I don't know it. I'll
The
have to.
rhyme is the
I'm sure
rhymes
I've read it, but I'll have
are
to
the
run
same.
immediately to find it.
The
Yeah.
ending rhymes are the same. So
It
Well,
didn't. I didn't notice it, Randall, but you're so right. And even the sonnet itself resonates. Very, very keen observation.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is a very keen observation. Wow, and I'm glad to have a poem now that I need to go read. I'm excited to read it.
you're
There
gonna.
are...
This is our gift to you. This is not
That's
just a
right.
sonnet, my friend. This is
That's
a
a good gift.
banger. This is also literally this is the nerdiest. I mean, this is definitely a nerdy sort of like situation, but like I'm embarrassed and yet joyful.
Well, thank
Yes.
you very much. I have a question for Talia, if I may. Can
Yeah,
I ask Talia a question?
of course, please.
First of all, that was awesome. I'm so excited to read the full story. It's so great. I mean, from the very first sentences, these characters just seem so real and they just have total authority. I'm curious to know, I mean, fiction to me just seems to be the most mysterious thing. I can't fathom how people write it, let alone write it that well. How much, so this is a totally naive question, how much overwriting do you have to do? Like to get the awesome chunks that we just heard, how many crumpled up bits are in the waste paper basket? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, landfill's worth, I think. Uh, yeah, and Nancy, when you spoke to, I appreciated your sort of connecting on that. Yeah, and my husband, Josh, who's on my Zoom account, so it says my name twice, but that's Josh. I'm very lucky that he's an incredibly good editor, and in addition to being a great poet. And so he can even tell you this story was really crappy when I started it. And it took so much to get to where it is. And for me, I mean, I don't know, some people I guess don't do that. Some people just, write from the beginning to the end or, and then revise, but I do a really embarrassing amount of revision, and sort of moving things around and
I think
just
that's something to be proud of,
I
to
hope
be
so.
honest. I mean, you're resilient because you love what you do. You know what I mean? There's no other reason why. So I feel like that level of resilience should very much be rewarded, and hopefully you felt that way in this. I'm curious about, just going off of that, like where and how this started for you. So in your first draft, it had to begin somewhere, even if we don't see it in this iteration. Did it begin on a stoop in New York? Did it begin in an art museum? Did it begin? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beginning was more in Florence, and in the sort of experience of, like, just for me being there as an adult now with my husband, with not a friend, but other experiences I had there in the past, and that kind of unique experience of, everything looking different and the same and what it brings back. And then it sort of became the challenge to like weave that into the story.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I hope, like, I know one person here, Annie definitely had was with me in New York as a child, living, having those bagels on the stoop. So my hope was to sort of make that real in addition to making the experience of that amazing Renaissance city real. But I don't know if, I think it mainly started in Florence.
Definitely felt real to me as A, your friend, B, New Yorker, Brooklyn, New Yorker growing up. Small tidbits like the wetlands, only some people know what that actually means. That like delicious nugget of truth of that particular time. Yeah, but also congratulations. Congratulations to both of you, both incredible work. Michael, I was really taken in, turned around, and want more. It's so delicious. And Talia, I'm in awe of your storytelling. So thank you, and thank you everybody for letting me peek in.
Thank you, Annie. Sorry to put you on the spot. Annie is a very, very talented storyteller as a costume designer.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'd like to say that there is a question, a very important question from Kate Hollander in the chat. When and how can we get the issue? Well, the answer is very simple. You go to our website and you subscribe. The new issue will be out in January of next year, early January, we hope, and will be shipped directly from the printers to all subscribers. So subscribe today at nimrod.utulsa.edu. Thank you all. And also, we have an open call for general submissions running through the end of this month. No fees. Send your work. We'd love to see it.
Yeah. Thank you, Boris, and thank you for the wonderful readings. Yeah. Especially Michael and Talia, of course, but the wonderful introductions too.
Thank you, Tim, for coming. Thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Take
buddy.
care.